Black woman got fired for bringing her son to work. Then her son calls the boss my dad. The words exploded in the air like glass shattering. What did he just say? Someone whispered. Cynthia could barely hear over the pounding in her ears. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Her 9-year-old son, Elijah, was standing in the center of the conference room, his tiny fist still clenched from when he slammed it on the glass table. You heard me, he said again, his voice cracking but loud enough to silence the room. That's my dad. Everyone turned to Daniel Whitaker, tall, pale, expensive suit, face frozen like he'd just been caught mid-lie. Elijah's eyes filled with tears, but he stood his ground. You fired my mom for bringing me here? And you didn't say anything? Not even to me. Cynthia's knees gave out, and she dropped into the nearest chair like the air had been sucked out of her. Her hands shook. Daniel, she whispered, staring at him. Is that true? He didn't answer. Silence clawed at the walls, thick and cold. Someone outside the glass walls of the conference room pressed their face to the window. Word was already spreading. Say something, Cynthia said again, louder now. Her voice broke. Daniel looked at her, then at the boy, and opened his mouth. But the fire alarm went off. Everyone jumped. Is that real? Someone said, already gathering their bag. Probably just a drill, someone else muttered. But the moment was gone, fractured by blaring sirens and flashing lights. The room emptied in a blur of confused footsteps and murmured disbelief. Cynthia didn't move. Elijah came to her side, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. She closed her eyes, held on to him. But the question burned in her chest. How long had Daniel known? 10 weeks earlier, everything had been quiet. Cynthia James woke up at 5:30 a.m. the same way she did every weekday. She hated waking Elijah so early, but mornings were the only time she could make things work. She had to get across town by 7:15 sharp, or she'd miss the first shuttle to Whitaker and Pratt, the boutique firm where she worked in legal operations. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than any job she'd had since graduating community college, and it had health insurance. Most days, Elijah stayed with her neighbor, Miss Gwen, an older woman who treated him like a grandson. But Gwen had a doctor's appointment that morning, and Cynthia hadn't found a backup. Can't you just stay home with me? Elijah asked as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. She was brushing his hair, trying to get it neat enough so the school wouldn't call again. I wish I could, baby, she said. But we've talked about this. No work means no rent. He didn't argue, just looked down. She crouched to his level, turning his face gently toward hers. Listen, she said. You'll come with me. You'll stay quiet in the conference lounge, just for a couple hours. Then I'll call in a favor, and someone will come get you. Elijah nodded slowly. Okay. He was used to rolling with things. Too used to it, Cynthia thought, and that guilt never really left her, even on her best days. She packed him a snack bag, grabbed her extra phone charger, and slipped out into the morning dark. She wore her navy blazer, the one she'd gotten secondhand, but still looked crisp if she ironed it just right. They arrived at the office just before 7. The lobby was still half dark, the security guard nodding at her from behind a newspaper. No one gave Elijah a second glance. As far as anyone knew, she was just another early riser grinding for the American dream. In the conference lounge, Cynthia set him up with his tablet, headphones, and a blueberry muffin. She kissed his forehead. 2 hours, tops. I'll check in on you every break. He nodded again, already lost in whatever game he'd downloaded. She stepped into the hallway and let the door close behind her. Something in her chest twinged. She told herself it was just nerves, that everything would be fine. But when she turned the corner and nearly ran straight into Daniel Whitaker, she knew it wasn't. Oh, sorry, she said, steadying herself. Didn't see you there. Daniel smiled, that practiced, polished kind of smile that people like him wore the way other people wore watches. Early bird, huh? Trying to beat the train crowd, she said. Smart. He looked over her shoulder, toward the direction of the lounge. Everything okay? Cynthia hesitated. She wasn't sure if he saw the backpack. Yeah, just getting set up. Big day, right? He nodded. See you in the 9 a.m. And then he walked past her. She exhaled. Too long. Too heavy. Something wasn't right. But she shook it off and went to her desk. She had emails to answer, files to prep, and a life to hold together. She didn't have time for what-ifs. What she didn't know was that someone else had seen Elijah. Someone in HR. Someone with just enough pettiness and power to ruin her day, and maybe her whole career. By 11 a.m., Cynthia was called into a meeting. By 11:15, she no longer had a job. And by the time she got back to the conference lounge to gather Elijah's things, she found him sitting quietly with tears on his cheeks. "What happened?" she asked. But he didn't answer. Not then. Not until 3 weeks later, in front of the entire office, when he finally looked Daniel in the eye and said, "That's my dad." Cynthia hadn't moved since the alarm stopped. The silence afterward rang louder than the sirens. Her fingers trembled as she gripped Elijah's shoulders, afraid to look at Daniel. Afraid of what would happen if she did. "Mom," Elijah whispered, "can we go now?" She nodded slowly, like her head wasn't attached to her body anymore. The lights flickered back to normal. Outside the conference room, people were either pretending they hadn't heard what they heard or were already typing it into a group chat. Daniel hadn't said a word. Cynthia stood up and took Elijah's hand. "We're leaving," she said, mostly to herself. But Daniel stepped forward, finally. "Wait." She froze. Elijah pulled her hand tighter. "You knew," she said, turning to face him. Her voice cracked on the last word. "Didn't you?" Daniel looked like a man who'd just realized he'd been sleepwalking into a wildfire. I didn't know for sure," he said quietly. "Don't lie to me." "I swear, Cynthia. I didn't know until just now." His eyes flicked to Elijah. Something shifted in his expression. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. Or worse, nothing at all. And in that second, she realized something even more painful than the truth. He wasn't shocked that it was true. He was shocked it had come out. 10 weeks earlier, after Cynthia was fired, she didn't cry. Not at first. She kept it together long enough to pack up her things, thank the security guard, and walk Elijah out into the cold parking garage. Only when they got to the car, her scratched-up '09 Corolla with the broken passenger window that she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months, did she let herself fall apart. She gripped the steering wheel with both hands and dropped her head onto it. Elijah didn't say anything. He just sat in the back seat, swinging his legs, looking out the window. Finally, she turned to him. "Did anyone talk to you while I was gone?" He shook his head. "Are you sure, baby? You can tell me." He looked down. "Some lady came in and said I wasn't supposed to be there." "What lady?" "I don't know. She had curly hair. And glasses." Cynthia closed her eyes. "That sounded like Angela from HR. She asked me if I was your nephew or something. I said no. I said I was your son." Cynthia's stomach twisted. "That's not your fault, okay? I didn't mean to get you fired." No, baby," she said quickly, climbing into the back seat and pulling him into her arms. "Listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. You hear me? Nothing. This is not on you." He nodded into her chest, but she wasn't sure he believed her. She wasn't sure she believed herself either. The next few days blurred together. Cynthia applied to everything. Admin jobs, legal assistant gigs, receptionist work, anything that would keep them afloat. Her savings could last maybe a month if she didn't touch the rent money. But the interviews were slow and quiet. And every time she filled out the reason for leaving last job box, she stared at it for a long time. She finally wrote, "Laid off due to internal restructuring." It was a lie, and it felt like it. At night, after Elijah went to sleep, she'd sit at the kitchen table with a mug of cold tea and just exist. Sometimes she scrolled through old pictures of him as a baby, back when things felt simpler, even if they weren't. She remembered the day she told Daniel she was pregnant. It had been raining. They weren't together. Not really. It had never been serious. Just some warm nights during the worst winter of her life. He was a young associate back then, and she was temping. They met at the office holiday party. He was smart, charming, careless in a way rich men could afford to be. She hadn't planned to tell him. But something about that rain made her bold. She expected anger. Or denial. Maybe even an insult or two. What she got was silence. He didn't ask a single question. Just nodded, put his umbrella up, and walked away. That was the last time she saw him for years. And when he returned, older, more polished, and with a title on his door, she pretended like he was just another face in the building. Because what else could she do? He didn't recognize her. At least, that's what she told herself. 3 weeks after she was fired, Cynthia's friend Tamika called her with a lead. "There's a case going on," Tamika said. "Some labor lawyer looking for folks who got let go without cause. You should reach out." Cynthia didn't want to. She hated the idea of being in the spotlight. But the bills were piling up, and Elijah deserved better. So she called, and she told her story, and the lawyer listened. And then she said something Cynthia hadn't expected. We've had 3 other women report similar firings. 2 single moms. One had a toddler with her for 10 minutes. Another got written up just for asking about flex time. You're not alone. That was the crack. That was the moment Cynthia's fears started to harden into something else. Not rage. Not yet. Just a quiet, seething kind of purpose. The invitation to the employee recognition brunch came 3 days later. It wasn't addressed to her, obviously, but Tamika was going, and she offered to sneak Cynthia and Elijah into the building through the parking garage. It wasn't exactly Ocean's 11, but it made Cynthia's stomach flip all the same. I don't know about this, she said, standing in front of her mirror that morning. This feels crazy. But Elijah, standing beside her in his tiny button-up and tie, said, You're not crazy, Mom. They are. She smiled, just a little, and then she took his hand, and they walked in together, through the side entrance, past old co-workers who looked at her like they'd seen a ghost, down the hall to the conference room where Daniel was standing, drink in hand, telling some story about company values. And then Elijah stepped forward and said the words that cracked the entire room in half. That's my dad. Now, in the aftermath of that moment, with the room still buzzing from it, Cynthia sat in the car again, just like she had the day she was fired. Except this time, her son was in the front seat beside her. What happens now? He asked. She looked at him. Really looked. Not just her son. Their son. I don't know, she said. But I think we just started something. He nodded slowly. Do you think he'll tell the truth now? Cynthia looked back at the building, where Daniel was probably still trying to spin his way out of it. I think he doesn't have a choice. The day after Elijah said that, Cynthia didn't go outside. She kept the blinds closed, ignored her phone, and let the world move without her. Not because she regretted it, but because the weight of truth, once it lands, is heavier than silence ever was. People were texting. People who hadn't spoken to her in months. Old coworkers. A cousin in Atlanta she barely knew. Reporters, even. She'd blocked 3 numbers by noon. The story hadn't hit the news yet, but it would. Someone in that conference room had filmed it. She could feel it in her bones. Something like that doesn't just disappear. Elijah sat at the table doing his homework like it was a normal Wednesday. Can I have a snack? He asked, pencil in hand. She gave him a banana and some crackers, kissed the top of his head, and said nothing. But she was thinking about Daniel. Thinking about the way his face shifted when Elijah said Dad out loud. Not angry. Not surprised. Just caught. She knew that look. It was the look of someone who had run out of time. Back in 2013, when she found out she was pregnant, Cynthia hadn't even told her mom for 2 weeks. She knew what would come. The lecture, the disappointment, the sideways questions about what kind of girl gets herself in that situation. Cynthia wasn't the kind of person who made mistakes. At least, that's how everyone saw her. Smart. Quiet. Always did what she was supposed to. Got good grades. Didn't talk back. Didn't take up too much space. But when she told Daniel that night, and he looked at her like she was a problem to solve, she knew she was alone. So she handled it. She got another job. She started taking paralegal night courses while working weekends. She skipped every doctor's appointment she couldn't afford and gave birth at the county hospital with no one in the room but a nurse she didn't know and a doctor who barely spoke to her. She named him Elijah because the name meant strength, and she needed him to have it. She never chased Daniel. She told herself it was dignity. But deep down, it was fear. Now, nearly 10 years later, her fear was gone. Not because she was brave. Because there was nothing left to lose. Her phone buzzed again. Voicemail this time. She didn't recognize the number, but she played it anyway. Cynthia, this is Daniel. I know I don't have the right to call, but I need to talk to you. She hung up. Not because she didn't want to hear it. Because she didn't want him to control the story. Not anymore. Her next call was to Rochelle Baird, the labor attorney Tamika had introduced her to. Rochelle picked up on the first ring. I was just about to call you. Cynthia's voice was calm, even. I want to go public. There was a pause. You sure? Yes. Once this is out, it doesn't go back in the box. You ready for that? I'm ready for him to tell the truth. Another pause. Then, okay, we do this on your terms. That night, Cynthia sat down with Elijah and told him everything. Who Daniel was. What he'd meant, or hadn't meant. Why she hadn't said anything all those years. I thought I was protecting you, she said. I didn't want you to grow up with a man who didn't want to be your father. Elijah looked her straight in the eye. I didn't need him, he said. I had you. Her throat tightened. That means more than you know. But, Elijah added, he doesn't get to pretend anymore. She smiled through tears. No, baby. He really doesn't. The article dropped 2 days later. Fired for being a mother. Former employee says law firm punished her for bringing son to work. Son reveals shocking connection to firm's partner. There was a picture, not of Cynthia, she'd declined, but of the building, of a clean, corporate logo and glass doors that opened to secrets. In the article, she was only referred to as Cynthia J. Her quotes were powerful, simple, honest. I wasn't fired because I broke a rule. I was fired because I didn't fit the mold. They didn't fire me for bringing my son. They fired me because they could. What do you call a man who lets a boy grow up fatherless, then fires the woman who raised him? By the afternoon, the comments were flooding in. Some supportive, some ugly. But the truth was out, and people were paying attention. Daniel tried to do damage control. He issued a statement, said the firing was handled internally and unrelated to personal matters. Claimed he was unaware of any familial connection until very recently. Cynthia didn't respond, but Elijah did. In a TikTok that Tamika helped them post, Elijah stood in front of the courthouse holding a sign. It read, "You knew. I was 9. What's your excuse?" The video hit 200,000 views by midnight. That weekend, Daniel showed up at her door. Cynthia saw him through the peephole and didn't move for almost a minute. Then she opened it. He looked smaller than he used to. Not physically, just less sure of himself. "I shouldn't have come here," he said. "Probably not. But I needed to." She crossed her arms. "You knew," she said. "I suspected. I wasn't sure." She tilted her head. "Really? Because you had every chance to ask. Every time we passed each other. Every meeting. Every email. I was afraid." "Of what? Being a father? Or being found out?" He looked down. "I thought it would be easier if I just stayed out of it." Cynthia laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. "Easier for who?" "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't mean anything." "No, it doesn't." He hesitated, then said, "Can I talk to him?" She didn't answer right away. "Elijah's not a secret anymore," she said. "But he's not a performance either. He'll talk to you when he's ready." Daniel nodded. "I understand." He turned to go, then paused. "He's a good kid." Cynthia looked at him like he was made of glass. "He's mine." "Of course he is." And then she closed the door. Later that night, she found Elijah curled up in bed, holding a drawing he'd made. A stick figure version of the conference room, her and him on one side, Daniel alone on the other. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I think so," he said. "Are you okay?" She sat beside him. "I think I'm getting there." He looked up. "Do I have to see him?" "Not if you don't want to." "What if I do?" "Then I'll be right there." He nodded. "I just want to know why he didn't say anything." Cynthia exhaled. "I wish I knew." Elijah looked down at the drawing again. "Maybe he'll tell me." Cynthia brushed the hair from his forehead. "Maybe he will." And for the first time in a long time, she believed that might actually be possible. It started raining again the next morning. Not the soft kind either. The kind that made the streets shine like wet glass and turned umbrellas into useless parachutes. Cynthia stared out the window, coffee going cold in her hand, and thought about the last time it rained like this. It was the day she told Daniel. Back then, she'd believed things would make sense eventually. That people grew up, stepped up. But some folks just got better at pretending. "Elijah," she called softly. He peeked around the corner. "Yeah. You still thinking about what you said yesterday?" He nodded, a little unsure. "I didn't do something wrong, did I?" Cynthia stood and crossed the room. "No, baby. Not one thing." He looked relieved. But something else was still behind his eyes. "I think I want to talk to him." Cynthia didn't answer right away. She just studied his face, the shape of it, the weight it carried now. He looked older this week. Not taller, not bigger, just older. "Okay," she said. "You sure?" "Not really," he said. "But I want to hear what he says. I want to ask him stuff." "All right." She bent down. "I level with him. But we do this on your terms. You call the shots. If you want me in the room, I'm there. If you want to leave, we leave." "Got it. Got it." They hugged. It felt different this time. Not like comfort, but like preparation. Cynthia texted Daniel later that afternoon. "He wants to talk. Tomorrow, at Lincoln Park. Noon. No lawyers. No press. Just you." The 3 dots blinked for longer than they should have. Then, "Okay. I'll be there. Thank you." She didn't reply. The next day was clear. Lincoln Park always smelled like grass and traffic. Kids played on the far end, dodging each other between slides and monkey bars. A jogger passed with a pit bull in a yellow raincoat. The city moved like nothing had happened. Cynthia and Elijah waited at a bench near the basketball court. He wore his hoodie with the blue sleeves. She didn't ask why he chose it. She figured it made him feel safe. Daniel showed up 5 minutes late. Elijah saw him first. There he is. Cynthia looked up. He wore jeans and a long coat. No briefcase. No sunglasses. Just himself. He looked tired. Elijah stood up. "You want to go alone?" she asked gently. He thought about it, then shook his head. Not this time. They walked toward Daniel together. When he saw them, he smiled, nervously. "Hi," he said. Elijah didn't smile back. Cynthia gave him a nod. "That's all." Daniel crouched a little to Elijah's level. "Thanks for meeting me. I know this isn't easy." Elijah said nothing at first. Then, "Why didn't you say anything?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I didn't know for sure," he said. Elijah's face didn't move. "But you thought I might be." "Yes." "And you still didn't say anything." Daniel looked up at Cynthia, then back at Elijah. "I was scared. I thought if I said something, I'd ruin everything." Everything was already ruined. That hit harder than it should have. Cynthia saw Daniel flinch. "You're right," he said. "You're completely right." Silence settled in. Elijah glanced at his mom, then back at Daniel. "Did you ever want to be my dad?" Daniel didn't answer right away. "I didn't know how to be," he said. "I thought, maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe you'd be better off without me." Cynthia couldn't stay quiet. "You had every chance," she said, low and firm. "Every chance to do something. You chose silence. That's not protection. That's cowardice." "I know," he said, without arguing. "I know I failed. I'm not asking to be forgiven. I want to start somewhere." He looked back at Elijah. "I know I can't make up for 9 years. But I'd like to try, if you'll let me." Elijah blinked slowly. "Can I ask you something else?" "Anything," Daniel said. "What's your favorite color?" Daniel blinked. "Blue, I guess." Elijah nodded. "Same." Daniel smiled. Real this time, small. "Cool." Elijah shrugged. "Just wanted to know." They stood there a moment, the three of them, suspended in something too new to name. Cynthia's phone buzzed. A news alert. She checked it quickly and froze. "What is it?" Daniel asked. She turned the screen to him. A photo of the three of them standing in the park, already online. Exclusive. Father, son, and scandal. Whitaker partner breaks silence after paternity reveal. Daniel paled. Cynthia's jaw locked. "You told someone?" "I didn't. I swear." "Then someone followed you. Or tipped them off." Elijah's eyes were wide now. "Are we in trouble?" "No," Cynthia said, pulling him closer. "You're not in trouble." But she didn't look at Daniel when she said it, because she wasn't sure he could say the same. Later that night, Elijah sat in bed, headphones on, playing a game on her phone. Cynthia sat outside his door, staring at the news article. Her phone buzzed again. "Rochelle, the lawyer." "I saw the photo," Rochelle said. "It's moving fast now. You okay?" "I don't know. We've had 6 more people come forward." Cynthia blinked. 6? Yeah. Parents. Caregivers. People who got quietly pushed out for asking for time, space, flexibility. This isn't just your story anymore. Cynthia leaned back. "What do I do now?" "You don't have to do anything," Rochelle said. "You already lit the match. But if you want to do more, I think we can build a case. Class action. Public. Real pressure." Cynthia looked toward Elijah's room. "I don't want him caught in the middle of a mess." "He's not in the middle. He's the reason it matters." Cynthia didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, "Let's talk strategy tomorrow." That night, as the city blinked and buzzed under the rain-washed sky, Cynthia lay in bed, wide awake, and asked herself one question. If the truth made them free, why did it still feel like a war had just begun? The next morning, Cynthia didn't get out of bed right away. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, her phone face down on the nightstand. The quiet in the apartment felt deceptive, like the air before a storm. Elijah was still asleep. She could hear his breathing, soft, and even through the thin wall between their rooms. It had been 3 days since the article with the park photo dropped. Since then, things had unraveled in a slow, public spiral. Local news had picked it up. Then national. Single mother fired for bringing son to work. Son outs boss as absentee father. Workplace discrimination? Or something deeper? Every outlet wanted an interview. Talk shows. Podcasts. One of them even offered to fly her and Elijah to New York. She hadn't answered any of them. Not yet. She didn't want to be a story. She just wanted to live. But it was too late for that now. By 9 a.m., the apartment buzzed with quiet activity. Cynthia poured Elijah a bowl of cereal and started making coffee. She didn't say much, but he noticed. "You okay?" he asked, chewing with his mouth half full. "Just thinking." He looked at her for a long second. "Is it about him again?" "Some of it. And the rest." "The rest's about us." He nodded like he understood, though she wasn't sure he did. He was doing that more lately, acting older, even when he didn't know how. "I don't think I want to talk to the news people," he said. "You don't have to. I just want to be normal." She brushed her fingers through his hair. "I want that for you too." But neither of them said the part they both knew. Normal doesn't come back after something like this. Later that day, Cynthia met Rochelle at a downtown cafe tucked between a flower shop and a laundromat. It was quiet. Just the low hum of conversation and the smell of burnt espresso. Rochelle slid a manila folder across the table. "These are the declarations from the others. 5 women. 1 man. All let go or pushed out under suspicious circumstances in the last 3 years." Cynthia opened it slowly. There were stories that looked like hers. Some worse. A woman written up for working from home with her infant during COVID. A man demoted after asking for paternity leave. A single mom fired the same week she asked for time off to attend her son's IEP meeting. They built a culture where family was a liability, Rochelle said. Cynthia flipped through another page. Her hands felt tight. "They made us feel like we were asking for too much," she said. "Just for showing up with a life outside the building." Rochelle nodded. "I've done class actions before, but this one? This is personal. We can bring this to court, Cynth. We can name names. Including Daniel." Cynthia didn't look up right away. "Finally," she said, "will Elijah have to speak?" "No. Not unless we go deep into discovery. And even then, we'll fight that." "Good. But if you're worried about him getting dragged through the dirt." Cynthia shook her head. "He already stood in the fire. He deserves peace now." Rochelle leaned forward. "Do you want peace? Or do you want justice?" Cynthia looked her in the eye. "I want both. But if I can only have one, I want the one that changes things." Rochelle smiled, but there was a seriousness behind it. "Then we start building the case." That night, Elijah had a nightmare. She heard him before he called for her. Just a sharp, breathless sound, like someone falling. She rushed in. He was sitting upright, damp with sweat. "Hey," she said softly, sitting beside him. "I'm here." He blinked fast. "I dreamt you left." "I'm not going anywhere. You and him were fighting. You both just disappeared." She pulled him into her arms. "Not gonna happen." He clung to her. "Promise." "I swear." They sat like that for a long time. The room dim except for the small night light shaped like a rocket. "I don't want him to disappear either," Elijah said after a while. She pulled back, just enough to see his face. "I thought you were mad at him." "I am," he said. "But I still want him to try." Her chest tightened. "That's a strong thing to say. I don't know if I can ever call him Dad. But maybe I don't have to yet." She kissed his forehead. "No, you don't. You call him whatever feels right. Or nothing at all. You get to decide." He leaned back onto his pillow. Cynthia watched him fall asleep again and realized. This boy had more grace in him than half the men she'd ever met. The next morning, Daniel called. She almost let it go to voicemail, but she picked up. "I heard you're building a case," he said. "No small talk." "You heard right. You're naming me? You're part of the story, Daniel. You made yourself part of it. I want to help." She laughed, short and sharp. "Help? I mean it. Let me make a statement. Let me talk to the board. I'll admit what I did." "And why would I trust you now?" "Because I'm not trying to save myself anymore," he said. "I just want to fix what I can." She said nothing. "I know I'm not a good man," he added. "But I can still be a better one." Cynthia's voice was flat. "This isn't about you becoming a better man. This is about the damage already done." "I know." He paused. "Let me stand next to the truth. Even if it costs me everything." She thought of Elijah's words. "I just want him to try." She exhaled. "You show up to the meeting Monday morning. Quiet. No lawyers. You sit in that room and listen to the people you helped silence." "I will. And after that, maybe we'll talk." "Okay." She hung up before he could say anything else. She stared at the phone for a long time after that, unsure whether she'd just opened a door or slammed it shut. But either way, she knew what came next. No more hiding. No more letting other people shape the story. It was hers now, and she was going to tell it all. The morning of the meeting, Cynthia dressed in silence. The blazer she wore was the same one from the day she got fired, cleaned and pressed like nothing ever happened. She clipped her badge to the front, even though it no longer worked. It felt symbolic, like walking back into the building with the key they tried to take. Elijah sat at the kitchen table, legs swinging under the chair, eating toast with peanut butter. He didn't say much, but his eyes followed her every move. "You nervous?" he asked finally. She smirked. "A little." He tilted his head. "Do you want me to come?" "No," she said gently. "Not today, but I'll be back before dinner." "You okay staying with Miss Gwen?" "Yeah," he said, chewing. "But if you see him—" "I know." He nodded. "Tell him I'm still thinking." Cynthia leaned down and kissed his cheek. "You're allowed to take your time." Outside, the air was sharp with early spring cold, the kind that could still bite if you weren't ready for it. She was ready. Whitaker and Pratt's offices hadn't changed. Same lobby, same marble floors, same fake plants along the elevator walls. But today, Cynthia walked through like she owned the place. Tamika met her at the elevators and handed her a visitor badge. Whole board's in. Some partners, too. Even Angela from HR. Cynthia raised her eyebrows. "She has the nerve to show up?" Tamika grinned. "Apparently, she's on administrative review. Word is, they're panicking." "Good." The elevator dinged. They rode up in silence. Cynthia felt her stomach tighten as they passed the receptionist, a new girl she didn't recognize, and into the same conference room where she'd lost her job. Today it was packed. 12 chairs around the table. A few people standing along the walls. Legal pads. Water bottles. Quiet tension, thick as smoke. Rochelle stood near the head of the table, setting up a folder. Cynthia walked in with her back straight. Daniel was already there. He didn't look at her, just kept his eyes down, hands folded, like a student waiting for the principal. "Thank you all for being here," Rochelle began. "This is not a deposition. This is not a negotiation. This is a reckoning." Someone at the table shifted uncomfortably. "Probably legal. We have credible claims from multiple former employees detailing discriminatory actions against caregivers, particularly working parents. Today, we begin by listening and by acknowledging what's been done." She turned to Cynthia. "You ready?" Cynthia stepped forward. She didn't have notes. Didn't need them. "My name is Cynthia James," she began. "I worked here for 3 years. I showed up early. I stayed late. I handled more than I should have had to. And I did it all while raising a son on my own." She looked around the room. Some looked away. Others couldn't stop staring. "One morning, I had no childcare. I brought my son for 2 hours. Kept him out of the way. Quiet. But someone reported me. HR called me in. And I was fired." She paused, letting the silence stretch. 3 weeks later, my son walked into this same room and told you all something that changed everything." She turned toward Daniel. "He called one of your partners his dad." I turned to Daniel now. He looked up. "I knew it was possible," he said. His voice was steady, but quiet. "I didn't act. I didn't ask. I convinced myself that doing nothing was safer, that I wasn't responsible." He looked at Cynthia, and this time, he didn't flinch. "I was wrong." Cynthia didn't speak. She let the moment settle. One of the board members, an older white man with a salt and pepper beard, cleared his throat. "These are serious claims, and obviously, there will be legal channels. But what do you want from us today?" Cynthia looked him dead in the eye. "I want accountability." She nodded toward Rochelle, who stepped forward. "We're filing a formal complaint with the EEOC. Class action status pending. You can fight it, or you can acknowledge it now and start making changes before a court forces you to." Another partner, a woman, leaned in. "What kind of changes?" "Flexible policies for working parents. Protected caregiver status. A review of all terminations in the past 5 years involving child-related infractions. And a public statement. Not just legalese. A real one." Silence again. Then Daniel stood. "I'll draft it," he said. "I'll say everything I didn't say before." The room stiffened. "You sure about that?" someone asked him. He nodded. "I need to be." An hour later, Cynthia walked out of the building with Rochelle by her side. "You think they'll follow through?" she asked. Rochelle shrugged. "Some will. Some won't. But you've already cracked something open that won't close again." They reached the street. Rochelle turned to her. "You want me to drive you home?" Cynthia shook her head. "I'll walk." It was cold. Her toes were already numb. But she wanted to feel it. She needed to know she was real. That night, Elijah waited at the window for her. As soon as she opened the door, he ran up. How'd it go? She took off her coat, leaned down, and hugged him. It went exactly how it needed to. He pulled back and smiled. Good. He hesitated. Mom. Yeah. Do you think he'll ever really try to be my dad? She looked at her son, her smart, strong, stubborn boy, and said, I think he just might. And for the first time, she believed it. Even if it took a while. Even if it was messy. Even if forgiveness never came. Because the truth was out now. And the silence, the thing that had held them hostage for years, was finally broken. 3 weeks later, the official statement went live. Not from the law firm's generic PR account, but from Daniel Whitaker himself. He posted it on LinkedIn, on the firm's website, and even read it aloud in a recorded video that went viral within hours. I am Daniel Whitaker. I am a partner at Whitaker & Pratt, and I am the father of a boy I did not raise. A boy I chose to ignore, out of fear and selfishness. I did not support his mother when she told me the truth. I watched from a distance while she worked in the same building I did, pretending I didn't recognize her. I sat silent while she was terminated for a choice I helped force her into. I will not ask for forgiveness, but I will do everything I can to repair the damage, to her, to him, and to every parent we failed. Cynthia read the post twice. She didn't cry. She didn't throw her phone across the room either, which surprised her. She just stared. Elijah read it standing behind her, one hand on her shoulder. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't think I hate him. She looked up at him. I'm not saying I trust him, he added quickly. But it's weird. I thought it'd feel better to see him admit it. But now I just feel kind of sad. Cynthia nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what the truth does sometimes. It doesn't clean things up. It just shows you the mess. He leaned against her arm. Can I write him back? You can do whatever you want. She handed him the phone. Elijah didn't write a long message. He sent 3 words. I saw it. Daniel responded a few hours later. Thank you for reading it. If you ever want to talk, not as a press story, not in public, just as me and you, I'm here. Elijah showed it to his mom. She read it slowly. You don't have to respond, she said. I know, he replied. But he saved the message anyway. The lawsuit picked up steam. Rochelle filed the formal EEOC complaint on behalf of 8 plaintiffs now, not 6. After the statement went public, 2 more came forward. One had been fired after asking for a private lactation room. The other had been denied bereavement leave when her child died. This is bigger than Daniel, Rochelle said in a meeting the following week. This is systemic. Cynthia sat at the long wooden table in Rochelle's office, hands folded in her lap. I know, she said, but he's the face of it now, whether he wants to be or not. They discussed timelines, possible court dates, the likelihood of a settlement. Cynthia didn't flinch once. She'd stopped being afraid the day Elijah stood in that room and shattered their silence. But still, the media kept circling. Everyone wanted to tell her story, turn her into a symbol, a mother, a victim, a hero, a scapegoat, whatever suited the narrative. She kept saying no, until one request came in that made her pause. A teacher from a local high school had emailed her. She'd read the case in the news. The school was hosting a panel on workplace discrimination and parenting. Would Cynthia be willing to come speak? No cameras, no media, just students. Cynthia read the message 3 times. When she finally replied, she said yes. The classroom was quiet when she walked in. Rows of teenagers slouched in hoodies and headphones, the way they always do when adults show up to tell them things they already think they know. But when she started talking, not preaching, just talking, they listened. I was 24 when I had my son, she said. I didn't plan it. I didn't have a savings account or a 5-year vision board. I had bills, and fear, and a man who walked away. Some of them looked up then, but I still showed up. To work, to school, to court hearings, to pediatrician visits. I kept showing up, even when no one noticed, even when they made it harder. She told them about the day she brought Elijah to work, about what came after, about how a 9-year-old boy had done what no adult in that office dared, tell the truth out loud. When she finished, a girl in the front row raised her hand. How do you forgive someone who left you behind? Cynthia looked at her for a long second. You don't have to, she said. Forgiveness isn't a requirement, but healing is. And sometimes they overlap. Sometimes they don't. The girl nodded, eyes wet. Cynthia thanked the class and stepped outside, back into the sunlight. She felt lighter than she had in weeks. That night, Elijah asked to FaceTime Daniel. He didn't want Cynthia in the room. She respected that. So she sat in the kitchen, close enough to hear if anything went wrong, but far enough to give them space. The call lasted 22 minutes. When it ended, Elijah came out, quiet. She waited. Finally, he said, he asked me what I liked. What I'm into. She smiled. And what did you tell him? Space. Drawing. Star Wars. You know. Stuff he should have already known. He sat down across from her. It didn't feel weird. No. Just knew. They didn't talk much more that night. But as he brushed his teeth, he turned and said, I don't think I want to call him Dad yet. You don't have to. Maybe someday. She smiled. That's your choice. Not his. Not mine. Yours. He nodded, foam in the corners of his mouth. I'm not ready for Dad. But I think I can try Daniel. Sounds like a good start. Cynthia went to sleep that night with the window cracked open. Cool air drifted through the room. Outside, the city pulsed. Not with fear, not with noise, just with possibility. She thought about all the ways this could have ended. How silence could have won. How Elijah could have stayed in the shadows. How she could have let her shame make her small. But none of that happened. Because one boy stood up and told the truth in a room full of liars. Because one woman refused to shrink for anyone, not even the man who left her alone to raise their son. Because the truth, once spoken, doesn't disappear. It echoes. It multiplies. It changes things. And in the quiet that followed, for the first time in years, Cynthia James felt free. By mid-April, spring had settled into the cracks of the city. Trees that had been bare for months were starting to bloom, and sidewalks were littered with petals like confetti someone forgot to clean up. Cynthia found herself walking slower these days. Not because she was tired, she wasn't, but because she could. For the first time in what felt like years, she wasn't running from anything. The lawsuit was moving. Depositions were scheduled. The firm had put out a second statement, this one from the board, admitting to systemic oversights and promising to cooperate with the investigation. It wasn't justice. Not yet. But it was a start. And Daniel? He was trying. He didn't show up with gifts. No promises. No fake enthusiasm. Just consistency. He and Elijah started having Sunday calls. Sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 2. They'd talk about books, or movies, or what Elijah was learning in science. Cynthia kept her distance, not because she didn't care, but because this was his space now. His choice. She and Daniel spoke only when necessary, about logistics, boundaries, or questions Elijah didn't feel like asking himself. It was awkward. It was uneven. But it wasn't silence. And that meant something. One afternoon, Elijah came home from school with a drawing clutched in his hand. Don't laugh, he said as he handed it to her. Cynthia unfolded the paper carefully. It was a comic strip, 3 panels. In the first, a stick figure version of himself stood between 2 taller figures labeled Mom and Daniel. Not Dad, she noticed. In the second panel, all 3 were arguing. Sharp little word bubbles with squiggles for yelling. And in the last, the 3 of them were standing under a giant speech bubble that said truth, holding hands. She stared at it for a long moment. This is really good, she said, voice catching. You like it? I love it. He shrugged, trying not to smile. It's not done yet. I'm gonna add color. She folded it back up and held it to her chest. Can I keep it? He nodded. It's yours. Later that night, she tacked it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. Thick envelope, heavy stock paper, official seal. It was from the firm. Cynthia opened it slowly. It wasn't a legal threat or settlement offer. It was a formal apology, signed by the managing board, addressed to her personally. We failed to protect your dignity, your rights, and your contributions. We allowed a culture to flourish that excluded, dismissed, and punished working parents, particularly mothers. For that, we are sorry. And we are working to ensure it never happens again. There was a second page. A job offer. Not a return to her old role. A new one. Higher pay. Management position. Full benefits. Flexible schedule. Autonomy. They wanted her back. Not as a concession. As leadership. She read it twice, set it down, and walked to the window. She wasn't surprised. Power doesn't like loose ends. Still, the offer rattled something loose inside her. Not anger. Not pride. Just a quiet, pointed question. Did she want to go back to the place that once erased her? That night, over dinner, she asked Elijah, if I went back to Whitaker and Pratt, Would that feel weird to you? He took a bite of mac and cheese, thought for a second. Would Daniel be your boss again? She chuckled. Technically no. I'd report straight to the board. He nodded, chewing. Then I think it's fine. As long as you want to go. She studied him. Why does it matter? He shrugged. You were sad when they fired you. And I think you're happier now. So I don't want you to go back to a place that makes you sad again. She reached across the table, squeezed his hand. That's a good answer. Also, he added, if you go back and you're like, their boss, that'd be kinda awesome. Cynthia smiled. Yeah, it really would. 2 days later, she sat across from Rochelle at their usual cafe. They're offering me a position, Cynthia said. Rochelle raised her eyebrows. Did not see that coming. They want me to lead internal reform. Oversight, training, hiring equity. All of it. Do you want it? I'm not sure. It feels like walking back into the house that kicked me out. Rochelle sipped her drink. Then maybe the question isn't if you should go back. Maybe it's why. Cynthia looked out the window. If I go back, it's not for them. It's not even for the money. Rochelle nodded. It's about the voice. About being the one who makes sure this never happens again. Cynthia didn't answer. But her silence said everything. She took the job. Not with a press release. Not with a photo op. She just showed up. First day, she walked through the front doors, past the receptionist who stood up straighter when she saw her, past the security guard who gave her a solemn nod, past the marble floors and the glass walls. Her name was already on the office door. Cynthia James, Director of Workplace Equity and Culture. It was a start. It was power earned, not gifted. And when she sat at her new desk, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt exactly as big as she was. That weekend, Elijah and Daniel had their longest call yet. 45 minutes. Cynthia listened from the kitchen as they talked about planets, new sneakers, and a field trip coming up. She heard laughter. Not forced. Not careful. Just real. When the call ended, Elijah came into the living room holding his sketchpad. Can I show you something? She nodded. He flipped to a new page, another comic. This one had no words. Just him and Daniel walking side by side. No speech bubbles. Just stars in the sky above them. I like space, he said. It's big. It takes time to cross. She ran a hand over his curls, gentle. So does forgiveness. He leaned his head on her shoulder. I think I'm okay with Dad now. If he earns it. She smiled through her tears. That's more than fair. And as the sun dipped below the skyline, warm and soft, Cynthia held her son close and whispered the words she hadn't said out loud since this all began. We're going to be okay. By late May, the case was headed to mediation. The firm didn't want a trial. Too messy. Too public. Too unpredictable. Cynthia understood this was damage control. But for her and the other plaintiffs, it was something else. It was a mirror. And they were finally holding it up to the people who had turned their backs. The mediation meetings were grueling. Hours in windowless rooms with lawyers circling language like vultures, picking apart words like harm, culture, discrimination. But Cynthia never looked away. She showed up to every session with her notes, her questions, and her spine intact. And Daniel? He was there too. Not as a defendant, not even as a representative of the firm, but as a witness. He testified on behalf of the plaintiffs. Swore under oath that he'd ignored her. Swore that he'd watched it happen and done nothing. And when the firm's attorney asked him why he never intervened, he said, because I believe the lie that silence keeps things stable. But silence is just slow rot. Cynthia didn't speak to him after that session. She just nodded once as she passed. He didn't expect more. That mattered too. At home, life wasn't quiet, but it was calm. Elijah was finishing up school. His grades were good. His sketchpad was full. On weekends, they started volunteering at a local shelter, something Cynthia had always wanted to do, but never had time for before. Now she had time. Now she made it. One Saturday, after they finished sorting donations, Elijah asked, if they give you money in the case, are we going to be rich? She laughed. Not rich, baby. Just safe. What would we do with it? Probably pay off some stuff. Save the rest. He thought for a minute. Can I get a telescope? You planning to look at other planets? He nodded. I just want to see what's out there. Cynthia smiled. That sounds fair. 2 weeks later, the mediation ended. Settlement agreements were drafted. Monetary compensation was offered, significant, but not enough to erase what had been done. More important were the reforms, policy overhauls, training, caregiver protections, an internal ombuds office. Cynthia's fingerprints were all over the new blueprint. She wasn't just a voice at the table now. She was shaping the damn table. Rochelle called her that night. "You did it," she said. "You changed something real." Cynthia didn't reply right away. "I didn't think it'd feel like this," she said finally. "Like what?" "Quiet. Heavy. Like I should be celebrating. But I'm still waiting for something to fall apart." Rochelle didn't push back. "That's normal. I thought justice would feel clean. It never does." They stayed on the phone for a while, not saying much, just holding the weight of what they'd carried. That Sunday, Daniel invited Elijah to the planetarium. He asked Cynthia first, texted, then followed up with a call. "Just a couple hours," he said. "I'll bring him back right after." She didn't say yes right away. She sat with it for a night, then asked Elijah. "You don't have to," she said. "Only if you want to." He nodded. "I want to." He came back with a bag of astronaut ice cream and a big smile. "He knew all the constellations," Elijah said, taking off his shoes. "I didn't even know adults could remember that stuff." She smirked. "He probably looked it up before you got there." "Yeah, but he tried." He paused, then added quietly, "He told me he was proud of me for standing up." Cynthia's heart clenched. "What did you say?" "I said I didn't do it for him. But thanks." She laughed. "Sounds about right." That night, Elijah showed her a new comic. This one was different. It had panels showing him walking across a bridge. On one side, a city in shadow. On the other, light. Halfway across the bridge, two figures waited. One was her. Strong, steady. The other? Daniel. Smaller. Out of focus. But there, at the bottom, in tiny, scribbled text, Elijah had written, "Still crossing. Still building." Cynthia stared at the page for a long time. "You want to keep this one?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. I think you should." He folded it gently, slid it into his sketchbook. 2 days later, Cynthia got an invitation. A keynote. A national conference on labor justice and gender equity. They wanted her to speak. Not about policy, not about lawsuits, but about truth. Rochelle told her to think on it. "It's a big stage," she said. "You don't owe the world your story." "I know," Cynthia replied. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't the same woman who used to apologize for taking up space. She'd carried a whole child through the fire and came out still standing. So she said yes. And when she stood at that podium weeks later, lights blinding her eyes, she didn't talk about HR policy or class action settlements. She talked about the day a 9-year-old boy looked a room full of adults in the eye and told the truth they were too afraid to say, and how everything changed after that. Not instantly, not perfectly, but permanently. She ended her speech with one line. "We don't fix broken systems with silence. We fix them by saying the words no one else will say, and not backing down when the room goes quiet." The audience rose to their feet. Cynthia stood still, not performing, not proving, just standing, exactly where she belonged. Summer came slow and thick that year, the kind of heat that made city pavement sweat by noon. But Cynthia didn't mind. For the first time in a long time, she didn't dread the days. She didn't wake up bracing for something to collapse. Instead, she woke up to sunlight, to Elijah's voice humming some half-forgotten song, to the gentle clink of cereal bowls in the kitchen. Peace, she was learning, wasn't loud. It was steady. It was earned. And it was never guaranteed. The national conference changed everything. Her speech made waves. Not just applause, real consequences. Firms reached out. Schools invited her to speak. A nonprofit offered her a seat on their board. People were quoting her online, calling her brave. She didn't feel brave. Not exactly. She just felt like someone who finally stopped waiting for permission to tell the truth. Daniel sent her a message after the video of her keynote went viral. That was powerful. Elijah saw it. He said, "She always talks like that at home too." She hadn't replied right away. Not because she was ignoring him, but because there was nothing more to say. He'd seen who she was now, who she always had been. She didn't need to remind him. Elijah was growing faster than she was ready for. He asked questions that made her blink. He started making his own breakfast. Sometimes, she'd find him at the window with his sketchpad, headphones on, completely locked in. One night, while they cleaned up dinner, he asked, "Do you think Daniel will always be in my life now?" Cynthia dried a plate, thought for a second. "I think he wants to be. But people want stuff all the time. Doesn't mean they stay." She looked at him, her son, somehow both soft and sharp all at once. "You're right," she said. "But here's the thing. He's not the only one deciding that anymore. Elijah frowned a little. What do you mean? I mean, you have power now. Over who gets to stay in your life. Who earns a seat. You don't have to wait to be chosen. You get to choose, too. He was quiet for a while, rinsing the last fork. Then he said, Okay, I'll choose slow. Cynthia smiled. Good. That's the best way. At the end of July, a letter came. Not email. Not a text. A real letter. Handwritten. From Daniel. Cynthia opened it sitting on the porch, bare feet tucked under her. Cynthia, I don't expect anything from this letter. You don't owe me a reply. But I've been thinking about the past year. About how many things I left unsaid. About how many chances I let pass me by. You raised Elijah with more courage than I've shown in my entire life. You loved him out loud. You told the truth when I hid. I used to think silence protected people. But silence protected me, and it cost you everything. I see that now. Thank you for showing him what real strength looks like. I don't know if I'll ever deserve the title he's thinking about giving me. But I'll keep showing up, because it's the only thing I have left to give. Daniel asterisk. She folded the letter slowly, then folded it again. She didn't cry, but she let herself feel it. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just truth. And that was enough. Weeks passed. Elijah started sketching a new series. Comics again, but these weren't just about him anymore. They were about her. One panel showed her standing on a courthouse step, cape fluttering behind her like a real-life superhero. Another showed her holding up a scale, one side heavy with stone, the other feather-light with truth. His favorite was a scene of them eating dinner together, laughing, a speech bubble from her that simply said, Pass the peas. Why that one? She asked him, smiling. Because heroes still have to do regular stuff. She laughed. Well, I'll take it. In early August, the law firm launched a new initiative, the James Program, a mentorship and equity program for single parents entering the legal field. Paid internships, childcare stipends, mental health support. Cynthia didn't ask for her name to be on it. They offered. She said yes, but only if she could oversee the rollout herself. I won't be a symbol without substance, she told them. They agreed. Daniel showed up to the launch event, stood quietly at the back, said nothing to the press. But afterward, as the crowd thinned and volunteers packed up folding chairs, Elijah walked up to him. Cynthia watched from a distance, unsure what to expect. They talked for a long time. Then Elijah motioned her over. When she reached them, Elijah looked up at her and said, I told him he can call himself my dad now. Not out loud, just in his head. Daniel looked like someone had just handed him the sun. He didn't speak. He just nodded, eyes wet, and gently squeezed Elijah's shoulder. And that was it. No big scene. No crescendo. Just a quiet, overdue moment. A bridge, still being built, with two people willing to cross it. That night, after Elijah was asleep, Cynthia sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out his comic sketchbook. She flipped to the newest page. It showed her, again, arms crossed, chin up, standing in front of a skyline of sharp-edged buildings. Behind her, Elijah and Daniel, not holding hands, not hugging, just walking in the same direction. At the bottom, in careful pencil, truth doesn't break things. It shows us where to start. She closed the book, held it to her chest, and smiled. The first day of school always hit Cynthia like a small wave of grief. Not because she was sad to see Elijah go. He was excited, more confident this year, taller, but because each new grade was proof that time kept moving whether you were ready or not. She stood on the sidewalk as the school doors swallowed him up, his backpack bouncing as he jogged inside. No looking back this time. That stung a little. In a good way. She turned, pulling her jacket closer, and headed back to the car. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. How'd it go? She didn't hesitate. Smooth. He didn't even glance back. A few seconds passed. Oof. Brutal. But kind of amazing. She smiled, slipping her phone away. At work, her new office was finally feeling lived in. Not flashy, not sterile. Books on the windowsill. A plant she forgot to water half the time. A framed sketch Elijah had drawn. Her holding a clipboard, speech bubble over her head. Let's make it better. Her schedule was full. Weekly sessions with the new caregiver task force. One-on-ones with interns from the James program. Compliance rewrites. Culture audits. It was real change. She wasn't a mascot. She was moving the system from the inside. Still, it wore on her. Progress came slow. Sometimes she left meetings with clenched teeth, realizing someone had nodded through her entire presentation without hearing a word. After one especially infuriating board meeting, where an older partner tried to explain her own initiative back to her like he was teaching a class, she vented to Rochelle. "Do they think I'm decoration?" she said. "No," Rochelle replied, without hesitation. "They think you're a threat. That means you're doing it right." That weekend, Daniel invited them both to the museum. Not just Elijah, both of them. Cynthia hesitated. She and Daniel had kept a respectful, polite distance. Their co-parenting was steady, clear, functional. But this was different. This was a family outing, and that word still felt risky. She agreed anyway. They met at the Science Museum downtown. Daniel was already waiting with tickets. Elijah ran ahead, pulling Cynthia by the hand. Inside, things were easier than she expected. Daniel didn't overplay it. He asked her opinion on an exhibit, let her lead conversations, watched Elijah with a kind of careful gratitude that made her stomach ache a little, but not in a bad way. At one point, Elijah said, "Mom, come look at this," and grabbed both their hands without thinking. They followed. Later, in the museum cafe, as Elijah sipped a chocolate milkshake, Daniel said quietly, "I know this doesn't erase anything, but I want more days like this." Cynthia nodded. "I do too, but they only happen if you keep showing up." "I will." She didn't promise anything in return, but she didn't pull away, either, and that meant something. Fall settled in slowly. Leaves crisped. Schedules got tighter. Cynthia spoke at another panel, this time for young attorneys navigating career and caregiving. After the panel, a young woman stopped her outside the venue. "I just wanted to say, you changed the way I think about success. I thought I had to choose between being a lawyer and being a mom." Cynthia smiled. "You don't. You just have to stop asking permission." She meant it. One night, weeks later, she found Elijah sitting on the fire escape, sketchbook in his lap, hoodie pulled over his head. "What you working on?" she asked. He tilted the book toward her. It was a sketch of a house. Not their apartment. Not Daniel's condo. Something new. A place with a wide porch. A dog in the yard. Two figures on the steps, sitting side by side. "Us?" she asked. He shrugged. "Could be. You want a house like that someday?" He nodded. "Yeah, with a space for drawing. And maybe a telescope." She smiled. "You'll have it. You think Daniel will still be around then?" She considered the question, gave him the truth. "I think if he keeps choosing to be, then yeah." Elijah nodded, satisfied. He closed the sketchbook. "I don't need everything to be fixed," he said. "I just needed to keep getting better." She wrapped an arm around him. "That," she said, "is the smartest thing I've heard all year." They sat like that until the sky turned indigo. A few nights later, Elijah asked if they could all have dinner together. Just the three of them. At home. Cynthia blinked. "Like here? Our place?" He nodded. "Just something simple. You cook. He brings dessert. We all eat." She didn't say yes right away, but she didn't say no either. And the next day, she sent the invite. Daniel arrived that Friday night holding a pie box and a bottle of sparkling apple juice. He didn't stay long after dinner. Helped with dishes, said thank you, said goodnight. As he left, he turned to Cynthia at the door. "I know this sounds strange," he said, "but this felt normal. I haven't had that in a long time." She nodded. "Normal's earned," she said. "Just like trust." He didn't argue, just smiled. "See you Sunday." After he left, Elijah turned to her. "That was nice." "Yeah," she said, quieter than she meant to. "It really was." Later, as she sat in bed reading, her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "You did the hard part. Raising him without me. I see it now. I'm sorry I didn't sooner." She stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, "You can't go back and fix the years, but you can show up for the rest of them." 3 dots blinked. Then, "That's what I plan to do." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because the next chapter wasn't about promises anymore. It was about showing up. Every day, on time, with truth in your hands. Thanksgiving came with a gray sky and low, slow rain. Not heavy, just steady enough to keep the windows fogged and the air feeling close. Cynthia didn't mind. It gave her an excuse to stay in sweats, move slow, and pretend the rest of the world could wait. She was chopping sweet potatoes when Elijah wandered into the kitchen. "You think he's going to show?" She looked over. "He said he would." "I know. He shrugged. "I don't want to get ready for something that doesn't happen." Cynthia set the knife down, wiped her hands. "He's not perfect, baby. You already know that. But this time, I think he's coming. Elijah nodded, still wary. Still guarded in that way only kids who've had to grow up early get. Cynthia ruffled his hair and handed him the bag of marshmallows. You're on topping duty. Daniel arrived 20 minutes early. Cynthia wasn't surprised. He'd been doing that more lately, showing up before he was expected, staying just long enough, never pushing. Never asking for more than Elijah was ready to give. He brought pies again, pumpkin and apple, and a bottle of cider with a little note tucked in the bag. She read it later, after everyone left. Thank you for letting me be here. That night, they sat at the table, the three of them, eating off mismatched plates, laughing at Elijah's impression of his history teacher, arguing over which pie was better. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was real. Halfway through the meal, Elijah looked across the table. Hey, Daniel. He looked up, startled that Elijah had used his name. Yeah. I think you can call me your son now. Daniel froze. Cynthia held her breath. Then Elijah added, just not, like, in front of people yet. Daniel smiled. Deal. After dinner, Elijah disappeared into his room to draw. Daniel stayed behind, helping clear plates. The kitchen was warm, full of cinnamon and something more subtle, peace. Cynthia wiped down the counter while Daniel dried the dishes. Neither of them spoke for a minute. Then he said, you didn't have to let me in. You could have locked the door and shut the whole thing down. I know. Why didn't you? She paused, then said, because he asked for you. And because I'm not here to punish you forever. That's not who I am. He looked down. I would have deserved it. Maybe. But forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. She turned toward him, leaning back against the counter. It's about what we need to live without bitterness. Daniel nodded. Do you think we'll ever? I mean. She raised a hand. Let's not jump ahead. He laughed quietly. Okay. Fair. I'm not rewriting history for anyone. But I'm not stuck in it either. They finished cleaning up without another word. Just the sound of water, dishes, the heater kicking on in the background. Later that night, after Elijah went to bed, Cynthia stepped onto the small balcony outside her room, wrapped in a sweater, tea in hand. The city shimmered, wet streets, soft headlights, wind slicing between buildings. Everything felt paused, soft. She thought about where she had started. That morning in the conference room. Elijah's voice, clear and high and shaking the walls. That's my dad. How the truth hit like lightning. How everything cracked open after. And how, somehow, through all of it, she hadn't just survived. She had become, not just stronger, not harder, wiser, softer even, with edges that cut, but also protected. She had built a new life out of broken promises. And Elijah? He was her greatest proof. The truth had made them loud, then strong, then free. She heard the soft creak of Elijah's door behind her. Can't sleep? She asked, turning. He rubbed his eyes. Had a dream I forgot my sketchbook at school. She smiled. Nightmare material. He sat beside her on the little bench. Mom. Yeah. I think things are going to be okay. She looked down at him. They already are. Inside, on the fridge, his latest comic was pinned. It showed the three of them. Not perfect, not smiling too wide. Just walking forward, through a cityscape sketched in gray. Above them, a banner blowing in the wind. One word, bold, in his blocky handwriting. Home. And beneath it, in small print, just for her. Built from truth. Held by love.